Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here!
One of the things you're going to hear me talk about on this video series has to do with the space program. I'm fascinated by the entirety of the space program, and having grown up in Florida, certainly we had a lot of connection to it. And specifically, I have a connection to it because my dad actually worked for the Apollo missions. He was there at the Space Center. He's one of the guys in the white coats that you see in the old films. And he was there actually working on the program and was involved when we had the moon landing. So it was kind of an interesting connection. So he told me a lot of stories about things that happened when I was growing up. Now, I was 3 years old when we landed on the moon in the first place. And I don't remember much about it, but I do have a recollection of a rocket launching and a man stepping out of a space capsule and landing on the moon. Now, I know now today it was the lunar lander, but at the time it was the space capsule. It was kind of cool, man. It was this interesting thing that happened. And, you know, we went through all these different things in the 70s and into the 80s. And so it was kind of something that was always a part of me because I was interested in it. And so I have a recollection of a lot of events that happened. I remember seeing the first space shuttle launch. It was kind of interesting and fascinating. The first space shuttle landing was really amazing to me. And I went and saw a launch with my science club probably in 1982. So somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 years after the program started, we went up and we watched a launch from Cape Canaveral. And I was hooked. I thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. And so I continued to watch the program from afar and kind of enjoy it and got into it a little bit. And it was hard at the time. We didn't have the internet, so you had to kind of keep up with it in various ways and find ways to kind of explore it. And then, of course, there was the Challenger accident that happened in 1986. And that was really sad. And I remember I was at the University of Miami at the time, and I was walking to class, and I remember seeing something weird in the sky. Though, of course, that far away, you don't really get the sense of, you know, the launches. You don't really get to see them from there. It's kind of far. There was something odd about the way that the vapor trail kind of did something odd. It was in the distance and you couldn't really see it, but I didn't really think much of it. Then I go to lunch and some friend of mine goes, "Did you see what happened with the Challenger?" I'm like, "What?" And then I realized what I had seen, and I was like, wow, I was really interested in that. And it became something that was more interesting to me, and I became a little bit more passionate about it, and I wanted to follow it more closely because here was something that went gloriously wrong. And it was spectacular in its failure, and it got so much international attention. So I wanted to know more about it, and I started studying more about the space program.
Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
So the 25th Space Shuttle mission is now on the way after more delays than NASA cares to count. This morning, it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Looks like a couple of the solid rocket boosters blew away from the side of the shuttle in an explosion.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
So flash forward a little bit. I graduate from college, and I'm looking for something to do with my life. I want to find a job that's interesting and compelling. And it's the early 1990s, and jobs are kind of hard to come by. It's a little hard to find a really good job that's really fascinating at that point in time. You know, the military industry was kind of winding down. There was things going on that were a little strange. You know, so it didn't have that same, there wasn't anything where I was like really compelled to take a job. And if I'm being honest, there weren't a lot of jobs out there that were really interesting anyway. So I decided to go back to graduate school. I happened to be in Orlando at that time, and I was looking around and I was like, you know, there's a really interesting thing that happened. The University of Central Florida was first conceived as Florida Technological University. And when they first came up as FTU, they really had an interesting bent because they were part of a NASA research program. They were there and they were helping NASA do some of the research that they needed into the space program and progressing it further. So this would have been the 1960s to 1970s when they were doing that. So there was this connection to the space program that was kind of fascinating. And I was like, that's kind of cool. They had become UCF a few years later, and so as UCF, they were still looking at the space program and doing some things. And I learned that there was some relationship with NASA at that point in time. There was some money coming in through grants and research projects and whatever, and I wanted to be a part of it. I figured I could go back to graduate school and I could be a part of the space program in some way. So I went and knocked on a bunch of doors around the campus. And I was trying to figure out who was working on space-related things. I got to know a couple of the professors through various things, so I wound up talking to some of them, and I found one that was doing some work on the space program. And she was great. She was really fascinating. She was doing some work on the shuttle's processing system when it was coming back out of the bay. Basically, what happens is the shuttle would launch, it would land, it would come back in and be retrofitted within the orbiter processing facility, and they would do a bunch of things to it that I'll talk about in the future. And then they would actually take it back out, put it to the vehicle assembly building, stand it upright, mate it up with the fuel tanks, and then send it out to the launch pad to launch. So there was a cycle that went through. And there was some work going on with the payload processing and the orbiter refitting that they did, that she was having some work, that she was doing some work on. She had some research grants to work on. And I was like, hey, that's great. And I asked her if she needed a graduate research assistant, and she said she did. But because I wasn't enrolled at the university at that point as a graduate student, I would just have to come in as a post-grad, semantics and technical stuff, right? And I would be able to work for her for one semester while I took some classes, and I'd get a stipend. And then after that, she could hire me on as her graduate assistant. And it was a great opportunity. I was like, this is fantastic. I can go work for the space program. And I did. So I spent, the better part of 18 months working on the space program. And it was really, really interesting. There was a lot of interesting things. And I got an opportunity to go up close and personal and visit the shuttle. I got a chance to talk to a lot of the engineers and other people around. I got a chance to go into the NASA library, which was really, really cool. And I really enjoyed, kind of reading up on some of the standards and some of the things they did, because that was part of my research. I was trying to understand how we got to this point and some of the things that we were doing to get us into space, and some of the range safety things we did and things like that. One of the people on the team I was working with made arrangements to go and meet with the people who did the recovery of the solid rocket boosters and what that goes on there. And that was really kind of interesting. So I got to visit that facility over by the water, where they actually go out and send ships out to recover those solid rocket boosters and bring them back. And that was pretty neat. And there was a number of other things that I did along the way. And I got to see a lot of things. It's kind of like peeling back the veil a little bit and seeing what goes on inside. And it was really pretty interesting. So over time, I'll tell you stories about some of the things that I went through and some of the things that I saw there. But I'd just like to share with you one of my favorite experiences. So because I was working on a research grant, I could go out there more or less anytime I wanted with a little bit of prior approval. And I just had to go through the badging office and I could go onto NASA property. Now, a few people who were like professors and working on actual projects, had the grant money themselves. They actually got full-time NASA badges and could go out anytime they wanted. Because I was a graduate student with the other graduate students, we couldn't just show up. We had to actually get this approval and go through something and actually go in to the badging office and get a badge every time. It was like a little plastic visitor badge they'd give you when you show up on property. And we had to be escorted around through any secure areas. So when we went into the orbiter processing facility or any other building, we had to have somebody there to basically sign us in. So that was kind of interesting. But it gave us the ability to go there more or less anytime we wanted. And so what we would always do, there was a group of about, 4 or 5 of us, I suppose. We would actually go out there anytime there was a launch, because it was always more exciting to see a launch from the premises of the Kennedy Space Center. So one day we're working out there, and we're working in the orbiter processing facility, and this guy we were working with said, hey, are you coming out for the launch? Next week, tomorrow, whenever it was. And we said, yeah, we're planning on coming out. We'll be out over there. And he goes, I got a better place for you to watch it from. When you come here, just ask for me and I'll take care of you. It's like, okay, cool, sounds good. So we came out on that day. The launch was maybe at, 10 o'clock in the morning or something. So we got there at like 9, got our badges, went over, and met with this guy over by the orbiter processing facility. And he goes, okay, let's go on out and see the launch from here. We're like, see the launch from here? Where is that? Now, if you're familiar at all with the way the Space Center is laid out, you have the vehicle assembly building. It's this enormous building, and you know, off the top of my head, I can't remember how tall it is, but I'm sure I'm showing you here exactly how tall it is. And it's gigantic. It really blots out the sun from where it is. I mean, it's huge. The thing is enormous, and it's made of concrete, so it's really kind of durable in that sense. Now, the launch pad itself is a couple of miles from there, and it actually goes out to the coast. So where we were standing, where he had us go, was in this space that was between the vehicle assembly building and the launch pad. So we were kind of in this kind of interesting space in between. Technically speaking, we were closer than anyone can go to a launch. There's a whole range safety thing about how close you can go in case there's an accident. They want to make sure that people are safe. The reviewing stand that you see sometimes where they have the clock and there's the people that sit there, that's about 3/4 of a mile further along, closer to where the launch complex is. So there's actually a little area that's a little further up. So we were closer than that. So they have these mobile launch platforms that they take out to the launch pad. So what they did was they assembled the space shuttle and the solid rocket boosters on top of this. This mobile launch platform is made up of different parts, and one of them is sort of this sort of architected, like almost scaffold thing that they have that they put on top of it, that they attach to it, so that way people can get up and do different maintenance work before the shuttle launches. So they had one of those that they didn't have attached to anything, that was just sitting in the grass right there by the vehicle assembly building. It was probably 100 yards away from the vehicle assembly building. Climb up the metal staircase and go up to the top, and the guy tells us, go to the top, go to the 3rd story on this. It's basically 3 stories tall. It's maybe 8 feet each, so it's like 30 feet in the air, something like that. And we go up to the top, and we're standing up there, and he goes, you'll enjoy the launch from here. We're like, okay, cool, sounds good. This is a great view, and you can see the shuttle off in the distance. It's probably about that big in the distance. I mean, just to give you perspective on how close we are. The thing is sitting there, and they have the countdown going on a speaker. So we hear the countdown, and it's like, okay, we hear the countdown. And then you see the shuttle lights up, and the thing would just be as bright as the sun when it lit up. And then it starts launching, it starts going up, and you're like, oh, that's cool, man, that's amazing. I think we even had a video camera out there. And it's going up, and you're like, wow, that's just incredible. And then a few seconds later, the shock wave comes. So the speed of light being what it is, we saw it when it went up. The speed of sound being what it is, we heard that a few seconds later. So the roar of the engines starts coming back at you, and it hits you in the chest. And it's like, whoa, it was the most amazing thing. It's just like all of a sudden you feel this pressure from the sound wave that's coming at you. It's the shock wave and the sound wave that's coming up from the shuttle launching, and it hits you. And because we're on this metal platform, the metal platform starts vibrating a little bit. It's kind of cool. It's like, oh, this is kind of neat. Almost a roller coaster ride in a way. And it's really kind of neat, and you're feeling it, and you're seeing it, and it's like, wow, this is cool. But it gets better. The shock wave goes past us, hits the vehicle assembly building, which is behind us, and then bounces back because of the size of the vehicle assembly building, and comes back from the other side and starts hitting you from the back too. And now you've got the shock wave that's just making you go, whoa! And it's amazing. I mean, it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen, because the whole platform is now shaking. You're feeling the pressure of this, and you're watching this shuttle go up into the sky. And it felt like it lasted for 20 minutes. It probably lasted for 20 seconds. But it was really, really amazing. I mean, it was just so cool to watch the shuttle go up like that and actually experience it in some way, that it became something that I talk about a lot. It's just one of those things that absolutely fascinated me, because it was so cool that it did that. Here's the shuttle launching, and we're able to see it from a very close vantage point. And I've been hooked ever since. I mean, I was hooked at that point, but ever since then, I've really been hooked and really interested in the entirety of the space program. And I'll tell you more about, some of my experiences in the space program, some of the things that I did, and also about the space program itself and some of the things that I learned along the way, because they're really all kind of interesting. There's some interesting nuances there that came out. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. I thought it was kind of fun, wanted to share that story and tell you about what you're going to see in the future about me, the space program, the shuttle program in particular, because I was part of it, and kind of talk about that. And thanks very much for tuning in.
What's your point, David?